The boardroom felt like a pressure cooker that Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago. 27 floors above the bustling Michigan Avenue, I stood before 12 potential investors, my laptop connected to the projector, displaying months of research and financial projections. My name is Sarah Chun, and after 3 years as a senior analyst at Morrison & Associates, this was supposed to be my moment to shine. The presentation that could change everything. The mahogany conference table stretched nearly 20 feet, surrounded by leather chairs that probably cost more than most people's cars. Crystal water glasses caught the morning light streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the faint hum of the city below created a constant backdrop of urban energy that matched my racing heartbeat. I had spent countless nights perfecting every slide, every transition, every word of this pitch. My small apartment in Lincoln Park had become a war room over the past month, with financial reports scattered across my dining table, empty coffee cups forming rings on important documents, and my laptop screen glowing well past midnight as I refined each graph and calculated every projection. The weather outside matched my nervous energy perfectly, gray clouds hanging heavy over Lake Michigan, threatening rain that seemed to mirror the tension building in my chest. This wasn't just any presentation. This was the culmination of my work on the Henderson Tech acquisition, a deal worth $42 million that could make or break my career trajectory at the firm. My parents had immigrated from Taiwan with nothing but determination and a dream that their children would have opportunities they never had. Standing in this boardroom, I felt the weight of their sacrifices and expectations pressing down on my shoulders like a physical force. Please subscribe to our channel to help us bring you more real stories like this one, and let us know in the comments where you're watching from around the world. The investors sat around the mahogany conference table, their expressions serious and attentive. Mr. Patterson from Bridgewater Capital leaned forward slightly, his pen poised over his notepad, occasionally glancing at his phone, where I could see notifications from Bloomberg flashing across the screen. Mrs. Goldman from Venture Dynamics had her reading glasses perched on her nose, studying the financial projections I had just revealed while making small notes in the margins of her printed copy. Behind her, the Chicago skyline stretched endlessly, with the Willis Tower standing proud against the gray morning sky. David Kim from Pacific Northwest Ventures was scrolling through something on his tablet, cross-referencing my data with information from his own research team. The room smelled of expensive leather and fresh coffee, mixed with the faint scent of someone's cologne, probably the distinguished gentleman from Midwest Capital Partners who always wore Tom Ford. Everything was going perfectly according to plan until she walked in. Rebecca Morrison, the boss's wife, burst through the glass doors of the conference room like she owned the place. Which, technically, she did. Her designer heels clicked against the polished marble floor with the confidence of someone who had never been told no in her entire privileged life. She wore a flowing cream-colored dress that probably cost more than my monthly salary, and her blonde hair was styled in perfect waves that bounced as she moved. Her Hermes handbag caught the light as it swayed from her arm, and the diamond tennis bracelet on her wrist probably cost more than my car. Everything about her screamed money and entitlement, from her perfectly applied makeup to the way she walked like she was perpetually on a runway. I had encountered Rebecca at various company functions over the years, and she had always struck me as someone who lived in a bubble of privilege, completely disconnected from the reality that most of us inhabited. Without so much as an acknowledgement of the dozen investors watching in stunned silence, Rebecca made a beeline straight for me. Her eyes weren't focused on my presentation screen or the carefully arranged documents on the table. Instead, they were fixed on something far less professional, my freshly manicured nails, which I had gotten done the previous weekend as a small confidence boost for this crucial presentation. "Oh my goodness, Sarah," Rebecca exclaimed, her voice carrying across the now silent boardroom with the theatrical flair of someone accustomed to being the center of attention. "I absolutely have to know where you got those nails done. The color is just divine, and the shape is so perfectly almond. Is that the new salon on State Street? I've been dying to try them, but you know how it is with these trendy places, you never know if they're actually any good or just Instagram famous. My regular girl at the Ritz-Carlton Spa has been booked solid for weeks, and I have the charity gala this weekend where everyone will be looking at every little detail. You know how catty some of those women can be about appearances." Her voice had that distinctive pitch that suggested she was used to commanding attention in any room she entered, regardless of what might have been happening before her arrival. I felt my face flush hot with embarrassment as every pair of eyes in the room shifted between Rebecca and me. The investors, who moments before had been hanging on my every word about market penetration strategies and projected ROI, were now witnessing what could only be described as the most unprofessional interruption imaginable. Mr. Patterson's pen had stopped moving entirely, and Mrs. Goldman had actually removed her glasses to get a better look at the unfolding drama. I could see the confusion and disbelief in their faces. These were serious business people who had cleared their entire morning schedules to hear about a potential 8-figure investment. And now they were watching a nail salon consultation unfold in the middle of their presentation. The digital clock on the wall seemed to tick louder than usual, each second feeling like an eternity as I stood there trying to process what was happening. My carefully rehearsed presentation timeline was crumbling before my eyes, and with it, potentially the biggest opportunity of my professional career. "Rebecca," I managed to say through gritted teeth, trying to maintain some semblance of professionalism despite my growing mortification. "We're in the middle of a very important investor presentation. Perhaps we could discuss nail salons later." My voice carried just enough firmness to hopefully convey the seriousness of the situation without being outright disrespectful to the boss's wife. But Rebecca was clearly operating in her own universe, completely oblivious to the gravity of what she had just interrupted. She actually reached out and grabbed my hand, lifting it up for closer inspection like I was some kind of mannequin in a store window. "Seriously though, this shade of burgundy is absolutely perfect for fall. And look at how evenly they applied the color. Not a single streak or bubble. You simply must tell me where you went. I'm having lunch with the ladies from the country club tomorrow, and Patricia always thinks she knows everything about beauty trends. I would love to show up with nails this perfect just to see the look on her face." Her grip was surprisingly firm as she held my hand up toward the light, completely ignoring the dozen pairs of eyes watching this bizarre spectacle unfold. I could smell her expensive perfume, something floral and heavy that probably cost $300 an ounce, as she leaned in closer to examine my manicure with the intensity of a gemologist inspecting a rare diamond. The silence in the room was deafening. I could practically hear the seconds ticking by on Mr. Patterson's Rolex, each moment representing thousands of dollars in potential investments slipping away. This presentation had taken weeks to arrange, coordinating the schedules of some of the most influential venture capitalists in the Midwest, and now it was being derailed by a discussion about nail polish. I thought about all the preparation that had gone into this moment. The late nights researching Henderson Tech's competitors, the early mornings reviewing financial statements, the weekend I had spent driving to 3 different cities to interview former employees and industry experts. My assistant had called each investor's office multiple times to confirm attendance, arrange catering, and ensure that every technical detail was perfect. The conference room had been reserved for 3 hours, with backup presentations loaded on 2 different laptops in case of technical difficulties. Every contingency had been planned for except this one. I glanced toward the head of the table where James Morrison, my boss and Rebecca's husband, sat with an expression that could only be described as mortified resignation. He had clearly been through this type of situation before, judging by the way his shoulders sagged and his hand moved to massage his temples. His expensive suit seemed to hang a little looser on his frame as he slouched slightly in his chair, and I could see the conflict playing out across his features, the battle between his role as a professional businessman and his obligations as a husband. But he said nothing. Whether out of marital loyalty or simple conflict avoidance, he remained silent while his wife continued to treat our $1 million presentation like her personal social hour. I had always respected Mr. Morrison as a leader and mentor, but watching him fail to intervene in this moment revealed a side of him I had never seen before. The side that chose personal peace over professional responsibility. That's when something inside me snapped. Not in an explosive, dramatic way, but more like a quiet click of determination. I had worked too hard, sacrificed too many evenings and weekends, invested too much of myself in this project to let it be reduced to a nail salon recommendation session. The investors were still watching, still waiting, and I realized that how I handled this moment would define not just this presentation, but potentially my entire career. I thought about my parents, working double shifts at the restaurant they had opened after arriving in America with nothing but hope and determination. I thought about my younger brother, counting on me to succeed so that he could afford to finish his engineering degree. I thought about every woman who had ever been dismissed or overlooked in a business setting, and I knew that this moment was bigger than just my personal career ambitions. I gently but firmly extracted my hand from Rebecca's grasp and looked her directly in the eyes. "Rebecca," I said, my voice carrying a new authority that seemed to surprise even myself. "I appreciate your interest in my manicure, but right now I have 12 of the most influential investors in Chicago waiting to hear about a $42 million opportunity. With all due respect, I think they deserve my full attention. The room fell even quieter, if that was possible. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, clearly unused to being redirected so directly. Several of the investors exchanged glances, and I could see a mixture of surprise and approval in their expressions. Mr. Patterson actually nodded slightly, his pen returning to his notepad in what I chose to interpret as encouragement. Mrs. Goldman leaned back in her chair with what looked suspiciously like a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. David Kim from Pacific Northwest Ventures had stopped scrolling on his tablet entirely and was now giving me his full attention with an expression of genuine respect. Even the gentleman from Midwest Capital Partners had straightened up in his chair, clearly intrigued by this unexpected display of professional assertiveness. I could feel the energy in the room shifting, transforming from awkward embarrassment into something that felt more like anticipation. Now, I continued, turning back to my presentation screen and clicking to the next slide. As I was explaining about our projected market share expansion, our analysis indicates a 300% growth potential in the first 18 months following acquisition. My voice grew stronger with each word, the confidence I had felt when I first walked into the room returning like a flood. The slide displayed a comprehensive breakdown of Henderson Tech's competitive advantages, including their proprietary algorithm that processed data 30% faster than their closest competitor. Furthermore, our due diligence has revealed that Henderson Tech's intellectual property portfolio includes 17 granted patents and 12 pending applications, creating a substantial moat around their technology platform. Rebecca stood there for another moment, clearly processing this unexpected response to her interruption. Her mouth opened slightly as if she was going to say something else, but then she seemed to think better of it. I could see the wheels turning in her head as she realized that her usual tactics weren't working in this environment. Her perfectly manicured fingers clutched her Hermes bag a little tighter, and for just a moment, I saw something in her expression that looked almost like embarrassment. With a barely audible huff and a dramatic flip of her perfectly styled hair, she turned on her expensive heels and clicked her way out of the conference room, the glass door closing behind her with a definitive thud. As she disappeared down the hallway, I could see her pulling out her phone, probably to call one of her friends to complain about the rude girl who had dared to prioritize business over beauty advice. The atmosphere in the room shifted immediately. Where there had been awkward tension and secondhand embarrassment, there was now something that felt almost like electricity. The investors were no longer looking at me with pity or confusion. They were looking at me with respect. Mrs. Goldman had put her glasses back on and was leaning forward with renewed interest. Mr. Patterson was actually smiling, his pen moving rapidly across his notepad once again. As you can see from these quarterly projections, I continued seamlessly, clicking to the next slide, which displayed a detailed breakdown of Henderson Tech's revenue streams. The company has consistently outperformed market expectations across all key metrics. Their proprietary software platform currently serves over 200,000 active users, with a retention rate of 94%, well above industry standards. James Morrison, still seated at the head of the table, caught my eye and gave me the slightest nod of approval. Whether he was grateful that I had handled his wife's interruption with relative diplomacy or impressed by my ability to maintain control of the presentation, I couldn't be sure. But his expression had shifted from mortified embarrassment to something that looked remarkably like pride. The presentation continued for another 45 minutes, and it was probably the best professional performance of my life. Every slide transition was smooth. Every financial projection was backed by solid research. Every question from the investors was answered with confidence and precision. The earlier interruption, rather than derailing everything, had somehow given me a shot of adrenaline that elevated my entire delivery. When I clicked to the final slide, a clean, professional summary of the investment opportunity with clear next steps, the room erupted in the kind of engaged discussion that every presenter dreams of hearing. Questions flew back and forth about implementation timelines, due diligence processes, and potential partnership structures. Mr. Patterson wanted to know about the company's intellectual property portfolio. Mrs. Goldman was interested in the management team's track record with previous startups. Miss Chen, said David Kim from Pacific Northwest Ventures, an investor whose reputation for thorough vetting was legendary in Chicago's financial circles. This is some of the most comprehensive market analysis I've seen in months. The depth of research into Henderson Tech's competitive positioning is particularly impressive. How long did it take you to compile this data? I felt a surge of pride at his recognition of the work that had consumed my evenings and weekends for the past 2 months. Thank you, Mr. Kim. The research phase took approximately 8 weeks of intensive analysis. I personally interviewed 37 industry experts, reviewed 5 years of financial statements, and conducted comparative analysis against 14 similar companies in the same market segment. The questions continued for another 20 minutes, each one more detailed and engaged than the last. These weren't polite, obligatory questions. These were the kinds of inquiries that signaled genuine interest and serious consideration. Mrs. Goldman wanted to understand the scalability of Henderson Tech's customer acquisition model. Mr. Patterson was particularly interested in their recurring revenue metrics and customer lifetime value calculations. David Kim pressed me on the competitive landscape and what barriers to entry existed for potential rivals. By the time the formal presentation concluded, I had preliminary commitments from 6 of the 12 investors, with the others requesting follow-up meetings to discuss specific aspects of the deal in more detail. The energy in the room was electric, with multiple side conversations breaking out as investors discussed partnership possibilities and due diligence timelines. Several business cards were exchanged, and I could hear phrases like impressive analysis and solid opportunity floating through the air. As the investors began filing out of the conference room, shaking hands and exchanging business cards, several of them made a point of complimenting my presentation personally. Mrs. Goldman paused beside me as she gathered her materials, her reading glasses now hanging from a chain around her neck. That was extremely well done, Sarah. Your ability to maintain focus and professionalism under unexpected circumstances was quite impressive. I look forward to our follow-up discussion next week. Her words carried weight. Mrs. Goldman was known throughout the Chicago investment community for her direct communication style and her reluctance to offer praise unless it was genuinely deserved. Mr. Patterson was equally complimentary as he packed his briefcase, carefully organizing his notes from the presentation. I've sat through hundreds of investment presentations over the past 15 years, and I can honestly say that your recovery from that interruption was one of the most professional responses I've ever witnessed. It speaks very well to your character and your commitment to your work. We'll be in touch by Friday with our formal response, but I can tell you confidentially that Bridgewater Capital is very interested in moving forward. His handshake was firm and lingering, the kind that suggested genuine respect rather than mere politeness. Once the room had cleared of investors, James Morrison approached me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of respect, gratitude, and what might have been a touch of embarrassment about his wife's behavior. He loosened his silk tie slightly and ran a hand through his graying hair before speaking. Sarah, he said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of years of similar situations, I owe you an apology for what happened earlier. Rebecca sometimes doesn't fully grasp the importance of these business meetings, and I should have prepared her better about today's presentation. In 25 years of marriage, I've learned to pick my battles carefully, but I realize that my silence today put you in an impossible position. That wasn't fair to you or to the months of work you've invested in this deal. I appreciated his acknowledgement, but I was also careful in my response. This was delicate territory. Criticizing the boss's wife could easily backfire, regardless of how justified my frustration might be. Mr. Morrison, I understand that these situations can be complicated. Marriage involves compromises that outsiders don't always understand, and I respect that you have to balance multiple relationships and responsibilities. What matters most is that the presentation was successful and the investors seemed genuinely interested in moving forward with the Henderson Tech acquisition. Sometimes challenges can actually strengthen our resolve and demonstrate our capabilities in ways that perfect circumstances never could. He nodded slowly, then looked at me with the kind of direct eye contact that typically preceded important conversations. The afternoon sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the conference room and highlighting the satisfied exhaustion in his features. Sarah, I want you to know that how you handled that situation today, maintaining professionalism while standing up for yourself and the importance of this deal, that's exactly the kind of leadership quality we need more of in this company. I've been thinking about restructuring some of our senior positions for months now, especially as we continue to grow and take on more complex acquisitions. After today's performance, I'd like to discuss the possibility of promoting you to Vice President of Strategic Acquisitions. The role would involve leading a team of analysts, interfacing directly with our biggest clients, and having significant input on which deals we pursue. It's a position that comes with substantial autonomy and the kind of responsibility I think you're ready for. The offer hit me like a lightning bolt, but I managed to maintain my composure even as my heart started racing with excitement. Vice President, a title I had dreamed about but never imagined achieving so quickly in my career. The position came with not just increased responsibility and recognition, but also a significant salary increase and equity stake in the firm's most important deals. More than the financial benefits, though, it represented validation of everything I had worked toward since joining Morrison & Associates 3 years earlier. "That's an incredible opportunity, Mr. Morrison," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady despite the excitement building in my chest. I would absolutely be interested in discussing the details of that position and how I could contribute to the company's growth in that capacity. The prospect of building and leading a team focused on strategic acquisitions is exactly the kind of challenge I've been hoping for. Over the following weeks, the Henderson Tech deal progressed exactly as projected, with each milestone being met ahead of schedule. The preliminary commitments from the investor presentation converted into formal agreements with remarkable speed, a testament to the thorough preparation and compelling presentation that had overcome even unexpected obstacles. We successfully closed the acquisition for $41.8 million, slightly under our initial projection but well within the acceptable range that would satisfy all stakeholders. The legal negotiations proceeded smoothly, due diligence revealed no significant red flags, and Henderson Tech's management team proved to be as competent and cooperative as our research had suggested. My role in the deal's success was recognized not just within Morrison & Associates, but throughout Chicago's venture capital community, where word travels fast about successful transactions and the people who make them happen. The promotion to vice president became official 3 weeks later, along with a corner office on the 29th floor with an even better view of Lake Michigan. The office came with floor-to-ceiling windows, a private conference area for client meetings, and enough space for the growing stack of deal files that would become my responsibility. But more importantly, the respect I had earned from that single presentation continued to pay dividends in every subsequent meeting and negotiation. Word had somehow spread about the nail salon incident and how I had handled it, and it had become a sort of professional legend that preceded me into new business relationships. Other female executives in the Chicago financial district reached out to congratulate me, sharing their own stories of similar challenges and expressing appreciation for someone who had stood up for professional standards without compromising their dignity or burning bridges. Rebecca Morrison and I never discussed nail salons again, though she did nod politely when we passed each other at the annual company holiday party 6 months later. Whether she learned anything from the experience or simply found other venues for her impromptu beauty consultations, I couldn't say. What I did know was that standing up for myself and the importance of my work had been one of the most crucial decisions of my professional life. The incident had taught me that sometimes the most important moments aren't the ones you plan for. They're the ones that test your character when everything goes wrong. Rebecca continued to attend occasional company events, but I noticed she seemed more aware of timing and context, perhaps having learned that not every moment was appropriate for personal conversations regardless of social hierarchy. 6 months later, as I sat in my new office reviewing financial projections for our next major acquisition target, a promising fintech startup based in Austin, I reflected on how a single moment of unexpected adversity had become the catalyst for the biggest breakthrough of my career. The lesson wasn't just about handling interruptions or difficult personalities. It was about understanding your own worth and being willing to defend it, even when the circumstances are less than ideal. My team had grown to include 4 junior analysts and 2 senior associates, and I found myself in the position of mentoring young professionals who faced their own challenges in the competitive world of venture capital. I made sure to share my story with them, emphasizing that moments of crisis often reveal opportunities for growth that might never emerge under normal circumstances. The view from the 29th floor was spectacular that afternoon, with Lake Michigan stretching out toward the horizon under a bright blue sky dotted with white clouds that looked like cotton balls scattered across an infinite canvas. The gray, threatening clouds that had hung over the city during that memorable presentation were long gone, replaced by the kind of clarity that comes after weathering a storm. Sometimes the most important professional victories come not from perfect circumstances, but from how we respond when everything goes slightly wrong. The Chicago skyline stretched endlessly in every direction, with the afternoon sun casting long shadows between the buildings and creating a golden glow that made the entire city look like something from a postcard. Looking back, I realized that Rebecca's interruption, as frustrating as it was in the moment, actually provided me with an opportunity to demonstrate qualities that might never have emerged in a standard, uninterrupted presentation. Leadership, grace under pressure, and the ability to maintain focus on what truly matters. These aren't skills that show up on a resume. but they're often the difference between a successful career and an extraordinary one. The incident had also taught me valuable lessons about workplace dynamics, the importance of setting boundaries, and the power of standing up for professional standards without resorting to aggression or disrespect. These lessons proved invaluable as I navigated increasingly complex client relationships and internal politics in my new role as vice president. The investors who were in that room that day continue to seek out opportunities to work with Morrison & Associates, and several have specifically mentioned that they remember me as the woman who handled that situation with such professionalism. In the world of high-stakes finance, reputation is everything, and sometimes a single moment can define how people see you for years to come. Mr. Patterson became one of our most reliable partners, bringing us 3 additional deals over the following year. Mrs. Goldman recommended our firm to her contacts at 2 major pension funds, resulting in partnerships worth over $100 million in combined investments. The respect I earned that day opened doors I couldn't have imagined, creating a network of professional relationships that continued to generate opportunities long after the Henderson Tech deal was completed. As I prepared to leave the office that evening, organizing the files on my desk and reviewing my calendar for the following day's client meetings, my phone buzzed with a text message from my sister back in California. "How did the big presentation go today? Mom and Dad have been asking about it all week." I smiled as I typed back, "Better than I could have ever imagined." And it was true, though not for any of the reasons I had anticipated when I first walked into that boardroom on a gray Tuesday morning in downtown Chicago. The journey from that moment of crisis to this position of leadership had taught me that sometimes our greatest professional victories come disguised as our most challenging moments, and that standing up for what matters most often requires courage we didn't know we possessed.